My name is David Pastorelli. I'm the director of the United Nations University Center for Policy Research, and I am delighted to be partnering with our sister institute in Portugal, the UNU Operating Unit on Policy-Driven Electronic Governance, represented by my colleague right over there, perhaps you could raise your hand, Morten Meyerhoff-Nielsen. I would also like to extend special thanks to UN colleagues from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa for their support and partnership for today's event. We are delighted to have with us Maktar Sak, Chief of the Technology and Innovation Section for UNECA, joining this high-level opening session, and also Suhila Amazuz, Senior ICT Policy Officer at the African Union Commission. To all our UN, civil society, private sector experts that have traveled from around the region and across Addis to join us this morning, a very special welcome to you as well. We were informed that we have, I think, 5 UN resident coordinators joining us online as well from across the region, and I'd like to extend a welcome to them also. This is an important conversation happening at an important moment. I don't need to set out a vision for this event. That vision has already been put forward in the African Union's digital transformation strategy for Africa. It envisages an integrated and inclusive digital society that improves the quality of lives of African citizens. I hope that today's conversation will contribute to that vision. I hope it also contributes to the aspiration of leapfrogging in Africa in the context of the digital economy. For that ambition to be realized, it will require partnerships and dialogue with those at the coalface of these digital challenges. Your presence here today is testament to your commitment to this agenda, to how we use data, information, technology to connect us and deliver shared development ambitions. I will not say more than that. I'm going to leave it to our high-level panel to set the tone and the scene for today's conversation. And I will come back in at our first panel. So without further ado, I would like to open by now giving the floor to Ethiopia's State Minister of Innovation and Technology, Mr. Yeshurun Alemayehu, for a welcome address. Minister, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Your Excellency, Anna-Karin Eneström, Ambassador and Permanent Representative and co-facilitator of the Global Digital Compact, Permanent Mission of Sweden to the UN in New York, Your Excellency, Chola Milambo, Ambassador and Permanent Representative and co-facilitator of the Global Digital Compact, Permanent Mission of Zambia, and to the United Nations. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you all to this important gathering to deep dive on the data aspects of the Global Digital Compact. I would also like to welcome excellencies and distinguished participants who have traveled to Ethiopia, especially Addis Ababa, from different parts of the world to attend this important meeting. The Global Digital Compact, GDC, is a comprehensive approach and a concept that emerges very recently to respond to the disruptive effects of the digital technologies, which are dramatically transforming our world by offering immense potential benefits for the well-being and advancement of people, societies, and for our planet, which at large will enable us to hold out the promise of achieving the Sustainable Development Goal. It's expected that the GDC will outline shared principles for open, free, and secure digital future. In this regard, the goal set in this draft GDC by the UN also targets for an inclusive, open, safe, and secure digital future for all, followed by the clear objectives of closing the digital divides and accelerating progress across the sustainable development goals, expanding opportunities for inclusion in the digital economy, fostering an inclusive, open, safe, and secure digital space, advancing equitable international governance and governance emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence for humanity. As Africa, the African Union Commission is also coordinating the development of African Digital Compact by facilitating the participation of all member states through the Special Technical Committee for Communication and ICT, STC, CITC. To highlight on Ethiopia's such efforts, Ethiopia is working intensively by giving due emphasis for the national digital developments. The 5-year Digital Ethiopia Strategy 2025, which is enacted 3 years ago, is a national blueprint to depict the key development and sectoral areas in the national digital transformation process. Accordingly, connectivity, interactive systems, enabling systems, and the ecosystem are considered as key elements of the national digital economy frameworks. Sector-wise, we have identified 4 paths which are unleashing value from agriculture, the next version of global value chains in manufacturing, building the IT-enabled services, and digital as the driver of tourism competitiveness. We have conducted a mid-term review of the strategy on the progress of the implementation of this national digital strategy. And yet a lot still remains. It is found that promising results are already have been achieved within those past 2.5 years. The national digital transformation journey is also the pursuit of the clear STI policy, which the government of Ethiopia put to lead the national science, technology, and innovation developments in the country. In this regard, our STI policy considered an explicitly stated policy elements and strategic directions for the digital technology related developments at national level. However, digital development is unthinkable without data, and the digital interaction by itself will generate data that should be stored, processed, and is disseminated properly and securely for decision makings and further predictions. Therefore, considering the significant impact of data, Ethiopia has developed a national data governance framework and data development directives in collaboration with UNDESA. This quick adoption of the governance framework and the directives makes Ethiopia be recognized by UNDESA as a model for other countries in the project. These tools will enable us to ultimately utilize the precious data, the precious resource, that is the data, in a responsible and secure ways. In terms of eligible legal and regulatory frameworks, Ethiopia has enacted the e-transaction proclamation, personal data protection proclamation, national digital ID proclamation, and other additional digital related proclamations, procedures, and directives to support for an inclusive, open, safe, and secure national data development. As a practical utilization spot of data and its products, Ethiopia has established an artificial intelligence institute which has produced remarkable data-driven solutions that can be applied on a range of application areas, including diagnosis, natural language process, and machine learning related to practical problems. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am mentioning the above stated national efforts and results to briefly highlight how Ethiopia is working towards a digital transformation at large and data development in particular. We are also actively participating in the development of Africa's digital compact through our representatives assigned the Special Technical Committee for Communication and ICT of the AU Commission. As you all recognized through the brief indications stated above, and if you also referred or reviewed so far Ethiopia's STI policy, digital transformation strategy, and digital related proclamations, procedures, directives, and legal and regulatory frameworks, the specific issues stated in these documents are quite aligned with the goals, objectives, and clusters in the draft Global Digital Compact. This gives us the confidence to continue on the expansion of the national digital transformation programs and the data development initiatives. In this regard, the National Data Warehouse Project, which is one of the national projects which is approved by the government and the financer, the World Bank, is one of the significant projects that will transform Ethiopia's government digital development initiatives. Based on the lessons learned during the implementation of the Digital Ethiopia 2025 strategy and the practical exposures of data development project initiations, we will also further extend our efforts to continue and contribute for the development of Africa's digital compact. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today, Data Deep Dive brings the co-facilitators, the Global Digital Compact, together with leading Africa data experts to reflect on the Global Digital Compact's data topics. Since the issue of data is quite connected with ICT infrastructure, electronic government, electronic commerce, digital ID, cybersecurity, digital payments, and in general, on the corresponding digital topics, we expect the discussions to indicate or strengthen practical recommendations in a holistic manner to address all critical requirements of data development. In this regard, it is quite important to address the actual challenges we Africans face in relation to data development. Also, the GDC addresses the topics of data privacy and security, and the data exchange standards, data for development, and cross-border data flows, under the objective of advancing equitable international data governance. It is crucial to work on the enablers of these advanced targets. Therefore, I call upon once again all of you, the participants, to data deep dive and indicate potential recommendations to be considered in the GDC in the areas of infrastructure and service developments and the digital literacy. According to the UN's EGOV Index report, the infrastructure and service development in Africa are far behind the global average. Therefore, how to discuss on a common topic of data development on the global stage before tackling the basic hindering factors in Africa? So this can only be possible if we approach it through a case-by-case modality, such that the GDC shall indicate clear directions on how to fill the digital divide triggered by these constraints. I'm confident that the participating experts and the leaders will forward valuable recommendations and comments to reach the data topic in the draft document to best serve Africa's requirement under the global umbrella. If we do so, we will have a global digital compact that will serve all as depicted in the goal of the draft GDC. Therefore, I call upon all participants to effectively use this opportunity to address these concerns. Finally, I would like to thank the UNECA, the United Nations UNU Center for Policy Research, the UN Operating Unit on Policy-Driven Electronic Government, UNU-EGOV, and the last but not least, the co-facilitators of this, the GDC, for successfully organizing this important gathering to deep dive on the GDC data topic. And I extend my invitation to our guests to use your time, your spare time, to visit the beautiful city of Addis Ababa and also Ethiopia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for those words and for setting the scene for today's conversation. We greatly appreciate it. Now turn the floor over to Ambassador Milambo for an opening address on behalf of the co-facilitators.
Thank you very much, David. Firstly, let me just recognize Honorable Minister. Thank you very much. Excellencies that are in the room, high-level panel that is here. Colleagues who are in the room, also our friends online. We really appreciate your time to be here with us. I do want to also recognize the various stakeholders who are in this room from the academia, civil society, and from other areas. Special gratitude goes to our host government for welcoming us in this beautiful city of Addis Ababa. We really feel at home here. Also want to recognize also UNU for your putting this deep dive together. It's coming at a very critical moment for the GDC process. As you well know, and I need not emphasize it in this room, but really the digital technologies offer to many individuals and society an immense opportunity to advance development and well-being. The optimism that we've seen around the GDC is not just a case of potential applications in these areas, but it has strong potential in the areas of health and education, in agriculture, and many other spheres, as highlighted by the Honorable Minister. They offer potential to resolve some global issues as well: climate change, disease, and the fight against poverty. Above all, the promise of digital technologies inclusion, and here in Africa, connectivity is the key issue. The prospect of knowledge and empowerment for people, no matter their gender, nationality, or race. The opportunity for developing countries to leapfrog, as David put it in his opening remarks. The prospect for firms and countries, regardless of where they are based, to participate and create value in a global digital economy. This is becoming very, very important at this time. This is the promise of digital transformation. This is why it is so critical for Africa, and this is why it is central to discussion underway at the UN about the future of multilateralism. But if you start, it's not just opportunities that we have, there are also risks, and they're clear. If we want digital technologies to deliver their potential, we have also to tackle the risks of privacy, safety, rights of individuals online as well as offline. We have to tackle the risk that inequitable governance of digital technologies will leave whole societies and countries further behind, widening the various inequalities that are there in the world. The absence of inclusive international governance of emerging technologies such as AI not only contributes to that risk, but raises challenges for safety and humanity of our world. Data encapsulates these opportunities and risks. This is why it features so prominently in the draft GDC. It is not possible to derive the benefits from digital systems for sustainable and equitable development without governing data effectively. That is why we propose equitable international data governance as one of the 5 objectives of the compact. We recognize that there is no globally recognized framework for data governance. We do recognize the framework that you highlighted, Honorable Minister, and congratulations on being a model. We recognize that the progress made at the national and regional level and within sectors to put in place policies and regulations to govern data. But it is all a patchwork at this point in time. The result is inconsistencies and gaps that can be exploited for harmful uses, missed opportunities for innovation, and worsening inequalities. We see the GDC to take tangible steps towards international data governance. We see this as the start of a process that will take time and effort by many different stakeholders. That's why we're really delighted to engage with you today on data and how the ideas of the GDC relate to Africa as a continent, and through its young entrepreneurs and drivers of a digital future. Let me say at the outset that we were struck in many consultations we've had over the past year with many stakeholders by just how data governance means different things for different entities. We have therefore tried to frame our 4 interdependent issues that we repeatedly heard. And the following are the 4. First is the central issue of data privacy and security. If we want data and digital services to be used, trusted, and shared, we need safe and secure systems to exchange data within and between societies. We need shared understanding of data privacy and data management practices. We believe that a good starting point is compliance with international law and international human rights, so that people are empowered to participate, manage, and use their data safely and securely. Second, we recognize that the benefits of data are unequally distributed today. We propose a series of actions to make data more accessible to communities and countries so that everyone can draw on data for their needs. We see open data and data commons as particularly important for local communities and groups to be able to draw on data to address their priorities and needs, for example, in public health or disaster response. Our proposals center around the developing of shared data standards to facilitate quality and exchangeable data, and also arrangements to allow the use and reuse of data for the public good. Third, we call for a collective effort to improve the generation, tracking, and use of data in the pursuit of the SDGs. This means increasing investment in building the capacity of countries, especially developing countries, to gather and use data safely, securely, and in public interest. It means creating international data collection systems to advance global priorities, especially around environmental data, disaster response, and food security. Fourth, and finally, we propose that conversations around how to enable data flows across countries in ways that are trusted and that support commercial transactions take place at the global level. This is the issue of cross-border data flows. This means bringing together stakeholders to explore the areas of convergence as well as the obstacles. And it also means exploring the scope of interoperability across existing regional and national data policy frameworks. Each of these 4 themes are interdependent and mutually reinforcing, but they also involve many different actors and many different areas to tackle. That's why we propose that they are pursued in parallel and that the GDC offers a way of supporting alignment and coordination across all these 4 areas. Others have proposed a single global framework to address all these things. Still others have said that data governance will be better addressed at the regional or the plurilateral level. Whatever way states decide, we urge these conversations to be inclusive of all stakeholders and states, and focus on tangible outcomes, especially around the foundations of investment, capacities, and open source systems to support data exchange. We are excited to hear your perspectives today on what you see as the priorities for data cooperation for African states, and how you see the pathways to effective data governance at the international and the regional level. So with that, I do want to thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency Ambassador Milambo, for clarifying stakes, what is at stake in this Global Digital Compact, and many of the issues that we will be discussing today. I'd now like to give the floor to Maktar Sek for some opening welcome remarks.
Thank you, David, and Honorable Ato Yaswin Alemayo, the Minister of State of Innovation and Technology of Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Honorable Ambassador, co-facilitator of the GDC, Ambassador Chola Milambo and Ambassador Anna-Karin Eneström, Honorable Ambassador, President Coordinator Online, and all delegates here. I would like to welcome you to this meeting on behalf of Ambassador Claver Gatete, Executive Secretary of Economic Commission for Africa. I would like to thank first of all our collaboration with our partner of UNU-EGOV. I think it's a very good partner, and we continue on this line. First of all, why our meeting today is very important. We all agree digital technology is a key enabler for sustainable development. As you know, it's contribute to 70% of the achievement of the 17 SDG. But where we are in Africa, we are facing a lot of challenge in Africa to take all benefits of this digital era. First, connectivity. We are very far behind. We have 37% of only of our population connected. And when we translate on the rural area, we are around 23, 22%. We have a lot of to do on interconnectivity and ensure this meaningful connectivity for all our population. Second, in terms of regulation, with the development of this emerging technology, we are lagged behind on the regulation of key technology like artificial intelligence, blockchain, nanotechnology. Now we have, across the continent, we have only 10 countries who already have a AI strategy or working on AI strategy. Another issue, it is a cybersecurity. We have a lot of concern on cybersecurity in the continent, and why the meeting is very important today to discuss about how we share the data, how we use the data, how we protect the population. And cybersecurity, unfortunately, costs 10% of Africa GDP. It's a lot. With this 10%, how many schools, how many roads, how many hospitals we can create in the continent. Another issue important is digital skills. Where Africa country, the youth population under 35 years will represent 70% of the world population in 2000. No, if 70% of our population will be under 35% by 2050. And this will represent 42% of the youth world population. We need to build the capacity of our youth. The digital skills is very important. As you know, 90% of the new job will be on digital and or we require digital component. We need to build this young generation on digital skills if you want Africa to be amongst the leaders in the fourth industrial revolution. Why the GDC? We welcome the GDC in Africa because it stands as a powerful testament to our shared vision for a digital future characterized by openness, freedom, security, and humanity. And we need to be embarked all to speak on the same voice for Africa. What are our priorities? How we can include our priority on this new framework to be adopted in the General Assembly next in September this year. Why ECA as one of the Regional Commission organized last year the consultation workshop on the GDC. Participation of around 34 or 32 African countries. And they come up with a policy declaration on the Global Digital Compact. And then this policy declaration covers several key priority areas of for Africa, like this connectivity, data connectivity, data security, capacity building. We'll come later on the detail of that. And also, yesterday we start to organize a consultation with several stakeholders on the alignment between the Africa priority and also the draft zero of the GDC. And we found it's very interesting that almost to all priority of Africa in the declaration, policy declaration developed in South Africa are included in this in this draft zero. We have some concern, but it's not very big. We can discuss later on that related to capacity building, to meaningful connectivity, to issue of media. We'll discuss later on that. But we are happy to see this first draft, including almost all priority for Africa. And I would like to acknowledge and to recognize also the contribution and also the commitment of our co-facilitator for that, and the congratulations for the whole work done. And we are here to work with you. We are here for Africa, and we work closely with our UN agency, our African Union organization, to make sure, I think by June, we come up with a final proposal for Africa. Thank you once again, and I welcome you. Wish you fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Maktar, for those optimistic words and an optimistic evaluation of the current zero draft of the GDC. I'd like to invite our final speaker to this high-level segment, Ms. Suhila Amazuz, Senior Policy Officer at the African Union Commission, who will be delivering a statement on behalf of Walid Hamdi, Head of Information Society Division, AUC. Suhila, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Excellency Yeshehun Alimayu, State Minister of Innovation and Technology of Ethiopia, Excellency Ambassador Chola Milambo and Ambassador Anna-Karin Eneström, the co-facilitators of the global GDC, Excellency, the Permanent Representative of Sweden to the African Union and the UNECA, Mr. Mektar Sek, who is the Chief Technology and Innovation at UNECA, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. So it is my pleasure and honor to participate in this meeting and also to speak on behalf of the African Union Commission. We believe this meeting is very important for us to highlight the progress made and also to reflect on Africa perspectives. So digital is high on the agenda of the African leaders. It is reflected in several decisions, summit decisions, and also several strategic frameworks that have been adopted in recent years, namely the Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa, the EU Digital ID, which is an aim to be an interoperability framework, Child Online Policy. We have also a strategy on creating enabling conditions for digital single market in Africa. We have also the data policy framework, which is like the framework that aims to build a common data space and also structured data governance in Africa through harmonized and also coherent data governance systems and also frameworks. So the framework is being implemented, and they will have the opportunity to provide an update during the session that will be dedicated to data. And there is work on progress to develop a continental strategy on artificial intelligence, and we aim to have it adopted in the coming months. So the same progress also we have, as it was mentioned by the Minister of Ethiopia, the same progress is noticed at regional and also national level. Many countries, they are adopting and implementing national policies and strategies on digital in general, but also on specific on data, on artificial intelligence, and also even the connectivity is being improved year after year. So as we start this important conversation on the on draft zero of the GDC, I would like to extend my thanks to the UN University for organizing this event and also for extending the invitation to us. And also I would like to thank once again UNECA for hosting this important event. And I will not forget the facilitators and also to thank them for coming to Addis to engage with this conversation, because it's very important to reflect on Africa perspective in this global discussion. And this is very important for us, and we welcome this initiative and we look forward to provide our inputs. So we believe this UN, as the UN engaged in this exercise of global GDC and also the leadership in the digital governance through the roadmap for digital cooperation, we believe UN is the right platform where we can bring all countries together, both developed and developing countries. And we believe that it is really time to open this discussion at the UN level in any inclusive, multi-stakeholder and multilateral environment. To support this process of this GDC at African Union level, we engaged in development on African Digital Compact. We went through online consultative sessions with all stakeholders, and we come up with a proposal. The proposal is aligned with the global GDC, and the objective is to support our member states in this exercise, in these negotiations, and also to come up with identify what are Africa priorities with this global, at global stage. So the priorities, as I said, for Africa, our priorities are mainly related to closing and mitigating the digital infrastructure and digital skill gap, and also ensure that inclusive access to digital to all African citizens, lay the foundations for the data-driven digital economy, and the objective is to achieve a digital single market by 2030 through coherent, harmonized policies and regulations, and also a number of measures that we need to put in place. We aim to achieve also aim to mainstream and integrate digital technologies in key sectors of the economy to improve and modernize sectors such as education, health, agriculture, and also see how digital technologies can support to address global crises such as climate change and also food security. We work also to develop the adequate and appropriate legal and regulatory frameworks to ensure security, safety in the digital space. We have already our Malabo Convention. Now it is the process of the implementation and supporting member states to develop the necessary legislations and also, as I said, to develop the necessary capacity. The last one is the objective, as I said, is really to focus on building capacity. There is a huge need for capacity across the continent. The need to develop both human and institutional capacity to enable an effective use of the digital technologies and also to integrate them in all aspects of the everyday life, with the objective is to support the integration and development agenda of the continent. As I said, the ADC is being finalized. It will be formally discussed by the African ministers on ICT and telecommunication next month. And from there, it will serve as the basis to support the global negotiations from the Africa side. And also there is discussions about the implementation of the GDC. We already engaged with the UN Office on Africa and with support of the UN agencies that we will start the implementation of the African ADC. We call it ADC, it is the African Digital Compact. And this will enable us to come up with unified and coordinated digital agenda in Africa that will be aligned to the global agenda. That is what I can say at this stage, but in this session on data, we'll have the opportunity to further elaborate on the data policy framework. Thank you so much.
Suhila, thank you so much for those remarks. Key themes, harmonization. I think everyone has spoken about the progress that has been made, defining priorities for the Global Digital Compact through efforts like the ADC, and thank you for bringing us up to speed on those developments. This brings to a close our opening high-level segment. If you can stay, please stay, of course. I don't know, Honorable Minister, if you can stay with us for the next session. We're going to move directly into panel session 1 on the data dimensions of the Global Digital Compact. And ask my colleague to just, there we go, we have it up on the screen. We are going to run this session until 10:45. We're a little bit behind in our program, but I hope that we can make up some time throughout today's conversations. I'm going to speak very little because we want to hear from the participants and the experts that we have brought to this meeting. I will simply say that in the context of the Summit of the Future, the principal impetus for the Summit of the Future was to identify undergoverned or poorly governed areas and to put forward solutions to govern them better. And I think we've all heard this morning that data is one of those areas that requires this investment of effort and that many people are already prioritizing that. The statistics are, I think, still quite shocking. We have complete data for the SDGs that is from the last 5 years for only 5 of the current SDGs. When it comes to the digital economy, and many of our high-level panelists have spoken about the importance of the digital economy and data in the digital economy, again, the statistics are quite stark. $1 of investment in the digital infrastructure, a country's data infrastructure, can generate $32 of economic return. The benefits of investing in this agenda are enormous. And the Global Digital Compact can help us draw from those investments and benefit from them. And we would like to hear from the experts here today on how we can overcome some very well-defined barriers. What are those barriers? What have we heard this morning? There are technical barriers relating to data, incomplete data, lost data, restricted or conflicting data formats. There are motivational barriers. Not everyone wants to share data, or there may be regulatory frameworks that prevent the sharing of data. There are economic barriers also to sharing data and legal challenges that arise from data collection and analysis. And finally, as we heard from the co-facilitator, Ambassador Milambo, there are ethical barriers as well to data sharing and data use. Now, the Global Digital Compact Zero Draft already provides a pathway to addressing these barriers. And I'll ask my colleague to just change the slide because I do want to show, and I have here on the slide, that there are 5 objectives currently in the Zero Draft. In under Objective 4 on data, we currently have 4 clusters where there are specific actions that are targeting these barriers and are trying to deliver progress in the context of the Summit of the Future. I hope our panelists today will engage with these clusters, with these 5 objectives, and provide their perspectives on the data components of the Global Digital Compact. With that said, I'm going to move immediately to our panelists. We have approximately 5 minutes for each panelist. Out of respect for everyone in this room, I am going to raise my hand when you are nearing your 5 minutes, and then I will intervene if you cross 5.5 minutes and ask you to bring your intervention to a close. You'll have our panelists on the screen. We're going to begin with Teke Akuete, founder and executive director of Africa Digital Rights Hub. Teke, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone in your excellencies. So from the perspective that we're speaking, and I want to look at this precisely from the African context based on some of the work that we have done. I would say that when it comes to the data dimensions across Africa, we are not all the same. There is a lot of diversity in the space, and particularly pertaining to the 4 areas that you have identified. We can say that there are, in spite of the significant efforts that we've seen in the last decade or so, there is still a lot of challenges around the diversity of the legal systems that we have. We still face significant challenges on harmonization of our laws, whether you're looking at data protection or privacy, whether you're looking at data exchanges or standards. It is quite interesting that even with the current discussions that are ongoing, for instance, around the digital trade protocols and efforts around cross-border data transfers, we still have a number of countries that have specific data localization laws that we see would be barriers to, even within the continent, in our efforts facilitating data transfers and exchanges as well. There are also diverse standards that currently exist that we need to look at. Now, these unique challenges are not only, interestingly, akin to country, if you're looking across Africa, but also within our countries. Recently, for instance, in Ghana, we've had the opportunities to even look at some of the policies that we've had and how it has been implemented. If you're looking at safety and security of everyone. And we've realized that, especially with countries that have significant majorities falling in the informal sector, a lot of efforts have not been taken to address the issues relating to minorities and those that fall within the informal sector. And mind you, they're very important because the language of digitization is very formal. And so to provide that safe and secure environment for them to interact and build this trust within that space, we need to address some of these things. Yes, the GDC to some extent addresses the full complexities of these issues, but I will say that for me, we probably in the African context need to go drill a little further to start looking at the implementation challenges that we will face in Africa. Specifically, who is going to lead that? We need to thinking around that. We need to start thinking around clear actions specific to data governance. And even though there has been a number of conversations around data governance, we are still challenged in terms of leadership, in terms of harmonization. And so we really need, possibly the AU may take lead, but we need that leadership to chart that course. We have to also start thinking around the challenge that we uniquely face, especially when it comes to data flows. As I have mentioned, even with the current progress, we still see a lot of diversity. Some of these diversities, looking at our peculiar context, are very genuine. We have different legal systems, we have different governance structures, we have different economic parameters of the various countries. And so these are very akin. And I don't think that as a continent, we will in the next decade even get to the point where we have uniform laws and structures. So we need to think around implementation of how some of these GDC objectives can materialize in reality for the African context. I think my 5 minutes is up. So.
Teki, I'm so grateful to you for keeping to time with your intervention. That was a wonderful intervention. Thank you for drawing attention to the challenges within countries, not just across countries, but also challenging us to think about the stepping stones over the next 10 years to progress. What does that look like? It's a stepwise implementation, and that we can't get everything done in the short term. So very helpful remarks. Thank you so much. We're next going to invite Diana Sang, Regional Director for Africa, Digital Impact Alliance, to take the floor. Diana, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try and pick from areas where Teki had not mentioned as much as it was very comprehensive, Teki. I think from the legal and regulatory side, which Teki has covered properly, I think I'd like to highlight the institutional frameworks, because that can also pose a problem when it comes to implementation and enforcement. And looking specifically at data protection authorities in Africa, there are no standards or norms around what really constitutes an independent data protection agency, which I think is very critical. In some areas, you see it's set up within, could be set up within, in many cases, we find them set up within regulatory, like the telco regulator. By default, they're normally one of the more financed institutions within government. So I think it's a natural default. But when it comes to independent, is that really a strong case for an independent entity? So I think some guidelines or the independence of DPAs is something that I feel the GDC could call out or add, especially from an African perspective. And then on skills and capacity, I think it's been mentioned a lot, but I'd like to single out data literacy, because compared to digital literacy, I think data literacy is something that is even prevalent within those who are digital literate, cutting across, government, private sector, and even worse when it comes to the citizens and the population. So I think calling out the need for the critical role of data literacy as a gap, and then some norms or frameworks that could be applied to ensure consistency at a national and regional level. And then similarly, identifying KPIs and metrics to really assess progress and maturity levels in this stage. What are the signs of good data literacy? What are the minimum requirements maybe for a government entity? What are the minimum skills that are required from that perspective? I think that would be good. The GDC called out cybersecurity in terms of specific skills. Could we have the same for data? Like data scientists, or what are those minimum fundamental skills that are needed from a data perspective? I'm happy that the GDC covered DPI, I think, which is really gaining momentum and moving fast on the region, but I feel some consistency and alignment is also critical, especially where we need to emphasize diverse models of DPI. And making sure that it aligns with and supports national needs and challenges, where while we adopt and learn best practices elsewhere, it's really critical to match it with a ground-up approach to make sure that we are not looking at it from a one-size-fits-all perspective. So I think from that perspective, it's great that the GDC is taking on digital public infrastructure beyond the G20. I think it was good to give it momentum, but the GDC will give it that universal acceptance also, driven by the United Nations. I think the AU is really making good steps to start grounding and creating some alignment on DPI implementation on the continent, particularly on data exchange. The data policy framework, the interoperability framework for ID, I think within the digital trade protocol of the Free Trade Area Agreement, there's some provisions that have been made on data integration and governance. But I think there needs to be a bit more guidance on standards and processes as well, and also on the institutional framework. And from a regional digital cooperation perspective, I think financing is also key, because sometimes financing can cause, can either hamper or fragment digital coordination on the continent. So I think financing, there's a need for financing to be targeted towards supporting initiatives that have already received a lot of acceptance. And in this case, I identified those initial frameworks that have been set up by the African Union to also guide development partner donor investments in the space, to make sure that there's harmonization from an implementation perspective. Lastly, I'd mention measurement. I think it's really critical. If we don't measure, we may not really be tracking the right things, and I think the information may not be guiding implementation as it should. In the case of DPI, for example, and with data exchange being one of the slightly less developed pillars of the DPI, I think it's important to identify what tools are there to measure DPI implementation, for instance. In the case of ID, one thing that distinguishes DPI from other approaches is the universality and the inclusion, that public scale adoption and inclusion. But what does that mean when it comes to the felt impact on people? I think identifying some key metrics that can be aligned on at a regional and national level that really speak on impact and not on deployment, so that you can actually see that is it really achieving public good, where I think deployment of DPI or other critical technologies in a country, I feel should not be the main focus, but what impact has been there, and what is the impact on the national goals at the macro level and the SDGs, but then also at the micro level, what is the real and felt impact and outcomes on people?
Thank you so much, Diana. We are setting a gold standard for time, focus. This is fantastic. Solutions-focused interventions for our co-facilitators. Thank you so much. Thank you for that intervention to focus on the independence of DPAs, emphasizing measurement impact and the felt impact of these changes. I think you're setting up the second panel quite well on implementation, which my colleague Morton will be moderating in a few moments. You'll have seen that we're playing with the microphones. Our colleagues online are having a difficult time hearing us, even though we can hear well in the room. So to the extent possible, bring the microphone close to your mouth, speak as loudly as you can for the benefit of our colleagues online. I think someone just cranked the volume also. Blaise, you are next. The floor is yours, Senior Fellow and Technical Lead, Africa Center for Economic Transformation.
Thank you very much. I think my colleagues have touched on some of the key important areas. I just want to emphasize that the push by African leaders for digital growth would definitely lead to cross-sectorial data flows between the public and the private sector organizations in the services that we seek to provide. Admittedly, governments appear to make efforts in this direction through various data protection laws and data commissions that have been set up to oversee the implementation of the laws. But I'll say that despite these efforts, like we still have limited efforts to promote and facilitate the necessary technical and investment that we need to make data available and usable within our economies. So the GDC touched on some key thematic areas, which I would say are very essential for a data-driven economy. But the goal should be to seek to democratize and make data a commodity within our economies. I think that is the only way we can derive the impact and make data more usable across our economies. By democratization and commoditization means that we address data inequalities across countries, between Francophone and Anglophone countries, between more advanced and upcoming governments, such that we can communicate seamlessly and exchange data across different sectors. Also, adopting a human-centered design would make sure that our data systems are responsible and ethical, and also account for the use of different sectors of our society. Looking forward, I think the GDC within African context can focus on tools for data experimentation and usability, integrating public and private sector efforts in this regard. I think the focus on public sector could also limit us in our ability to unlock financial resources for data systems and data infrastructure. So they need to also create data repositories for experimentation is key. For most of the innovators, they need such repositories that have data aggregated and makes it easy for them to test data models, especially for AI that we are pushing for. And so these data repositories could also come with sandboxes that, again, makes learning very easy for both public and private sector. And through sandboxes, we can also develop responsible and responsive data laws that promote innovation and not rather stifle innovation. Also, we should also push for shared data infrastructure within the value chain, bringing on board the private sector to co-invest and develop the data systems that we can store data in a safe and secure way. And also by doing so, we reduce the cost to data innovation and making it easy for everybody to use data and to host it easily for whatever they want to do. Lastly, addressing the issue of localization. One of my colleagues touched about it, but I think we should move towards data sovereignty and not localization. So the leaders should push for data sovereignty, that wherever you host your data within the African continent shouldn't matter. The data protection agencies should only have an oversight and understand how the data is being used across borders. I think localization rather would increase the cost of innovation and how easily we can provide public services. Even for researchers, having access to having to localize your data across different African countries just increases the cost of innovation and possibly reduces collaboration across the continent. Looking forward, our policies should seek to be risk-based and anticipatory of the challenges that we have to face. And this means that instead of punitive measures that we see in our data protection laws, they should rather seek to anticipate the risks and work with innovators, researchers to make sure that we have better data governance systems. So having this would make innovation meet the security needs and the privacy localization drive. So the Global Digital Compact should serve as a framework for integration within the regional context, but also guide stakeholders in the technical and financial commitments, investments, and technical expertise towards local development needs across the continent. The compact therefore should provide technical assistance to the regional compacts, facilitate policy discussions and dialogues such as this, and then finally promote data sharing and collaboration. And again, I'll stress the need to bring on board the private sector to foster partnerships and knowledge exchange across the continent. So these are my takes, and I'll say the call for collaboration and commitments towards a better data governance framework is key, and the compact should provide a framework and work in a very iterative and flexible way to make this possible on the continent. Thank you.
Blaise, thank you so much for those remarks. We heard you clearly: democratization and commoditization, two key words in your intervention. You've also helped focus and hone in on the costs of localization. And I think that's quite helpful, and I'm sure it will come up again in this debate today. Just a quick check for colleagues online. Can you hear us better? Because it's now quite loud in the room. Great. Fantastic. We're going to move to our next speaker, Varaizo Faith Magodo Matimba, Grants and Program Manager at Policy with 2 L's. Varaizo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone, and for all your contributions. My interventions are going to focus mainly on the visibility of women beyond their issues, and this calls for the strategy that we're going to implement here in Africa, particularly emphasizing on the digital transformation strategy. So the recommendation that we have is that we generally need to move away from patriarchal views of gender data and understand that gender data is niche and it's not general. I think that it is very important to recognize that there's still an overrepresentation of certain groups, mostly in the global node data sets. And what we need to do is to mainstream gender responsive standards in data collection and emphasize on the equal participation of women in policy shaping discussions around data use, privacy, and governance. I think that the Zero Draft presents in itself a unique opportunity for the capacity building of women leaders, particularly because when we're looking at sustainability, we really need to build the capacity of women leaders. And this is with particular reference to the AU ECOSOC processes. I think that we really need to increase our efforts in empowering women leaders as the representatives of women. And then lastly, we also need to ensure how women can own their narrative, particularly with regards to data governance. I think our recommendation is that civil society has set a blueprint in a way. Our work that we've done also centers 6 pillars of what we call Afrofeminist data governance. And those pillars look to decoloniality and also look to at women's embodied knowledge. I think that there are a lot currently in the draft. It addresses most of these issues it encompasses them to a larger extent, but however, there's still a big gap when it comes to big tech and accountability. I think that it is important, especially when we look at Africa's strategy, to look at how we can increase accountability, not only between the countries, but also within the countries. I think that the message here is around standardization of gender responsiveness. And this should be led by civil society, who in turn should also have, I think, when we look at the power asymmetries, they should also have a bigger say in drafting and contributing to how they should benefit from data use by governments and also in turn ensure efficient government service delivery. I think that with the Zero Draft Digital Compact, it presents in itself a unique opportunity for new and current leaders to get new skills and support and greater management to help them and improve them to be better leaders, as well as improve technology and data policy making. I think that we all know that there is an increased conversation around the digital economy, and you know that women form a larger population of the people that are actually using financial technologies like mobile money. So it is important for us to also increase our efforts and for the language within the Zero Draft to include efforts of accountability, to include efforts of alignment, especially of emerging technologies, for them to be in line with international human rights standards. I think that lastly, to close, African women's role now presenting itself an opportunity to shape internet freedoms and explore data governance models in the region. So I think that it is also important for us to recognize issues of achieving universal connectivity. And that means that there's need within the Zero Draft also look at what meaningful connectivity strategies look like, especially for African women. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Verizon, for that intervention. You didn't hear, but Maktar right beside me said very good at the end of your presentation. We take away from your remarks that inclusiveness leads to more efficient service delivery, that we need to highlight where women are already leaders, including among users of mobile financial technology, and we need to be more sensitive to the role of women in technology and their use of data. Thank you so much for those important interventions. Our final speaker, Suhila Amazuz, we heard from her already this morning, speaking again from the African Union Commission. Suhila, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Yes. Thank you for giving me the floor for the second time. In fact, I think it is an opportunity to highlight some aspects to the AU data policy framework. As I said, the framework aims to be the framework that will really enable all African countries to take advantage of the huge amount of data being generated every day by our citizens, by government institutions, by the industry, and also by the simple citizens that are going online. I think this framework was adopted in 2021 by the AU Summit. After that, as it was mentioned, we started immediately working on the implementation, because we believe that the implementation is very important to build the individual and collective capacity of our member states. So we developed an implementation plan that identifies key actions that needs to be taken as the framework highlight high-level recommendations, like both at national level, at regional level, at continental level, what needs to be done, like for Africa to govern, to manage its, and to own its data, because there is also need for ownership of African data. So after the framework, we developed this implementation plan, and also we went to develop responsibility matrix, where we identify the role and the responsibility of each regional organization in supporting this exercise, as we know that there is some activities that needs to be undertaken at national level. And for this, we have started by assisting countries to conduct national assessment. We developed the tool, and so far we have 30 countries that expressed interest to be part of this exercise, and the work is ongoing. Because we have noticed, like before this development of this framework, there's more focus on personal data protection, but we didn't see data as an asset that can be used and leveraged for the development of the continent, for development of digital economy. So the framework put data as a resource, it addressed data from all perspectives, personal, non-personal data, open data, it gives guidance on all aspects of data. And since the adoption of this framework, we have seen many countries now coming with their national data policy. The number is increasing every year. So the framework put in place vision, how we want to use this data, and as the objective is really to empower African countries and African nations, and to help them to safeguard their interest in this digital environment. We come up with a number of principles, and among them it's really based on principle of cooperation, solidarity among countries, and also the need to accountability. And I think it is some aspects that we have noticed that are not reflected in the GDC. And as I said, the comments that I may make on the GDC in line with what we have already identified as the common approach on data governance in Africa. So on the section on personal data protection, as I mentioned on the principles, I think there is a need to include data justice. There is a really need to have equal access and equal benefits to all citizens to this strategic resource. We need also to include accountability of states and not state actors to the responsible and ethical use of data. And also, as it was mentioned in the document, there is a need to harmonization of policies and regulations to safeguard the personal data, and also the rights of people to privacy. On the second session on data exchanges and standards, we propose to include data capabilities, as it is important to mention that many countries, they don't have the necessary capabilities to commit to what is indicated in this draft 0, mainly, as it was mentioned by the previous speaker, the infrastructure, and also developing the necessary policies, and also the necessary human resources, because there is a need for data professionals, and there is a need to acknowledge disparities between countries and regions, because they may not implement the recommendations at the same level. And also we believe that there is a need also to emphasize on the value creation of data, as it is key that to support the digital economy. And I think the equal opportunities is indicated, and also equitable sharing of benefits. On the data for development, there is a reference to close the data gap. And I think we need maybe to emphasize more how to close this gap, because I think for us, we are very affected by this gap, and we look forward to see what concrete measures the United Nations can propose on this. I think maybe there is need to propose concrete actions and measures and commitments by different stakeholders on how we can close this gap, and also how we can bring all countries together to benefit from this data. On the section on cross-border data flows, I would question, it's kind of question is how to develop this global mechanism to facilitate data flows, considering the different approaches on data governance across the world. And also we have noticed there is a reference to some existing frameworks like the data free flow with trust, and also the OECD guidelines, which we believe they are developed by the developed countries. They are developed within the G20, and it is the most advanced countries, and they may not fit the needs and the realities of developing countries. It is what I can say at this stage. Thank you.
I am not going to be able to summarize those remarks. Incredibly detailed and focused. Really helpful to go straight to the text of the zero draft. I'm sure the co-facilitators will agree with me. I really appreciate that intervention. Thank you so much, Savila. We have 10, maybe we can stretch and go to 15 minutes. I do want to open the floor for others in the room and online to make either a short intervention or to ask a question to one of our speakers. If we don't have many questions or interventions, we will break at 10:45, but I'm willing to stretch us to 10:50. If you have a question, turn your card over like this, and I will try to spot you in the room, and I will call on you. Are there any cards now? I think that's Allison. Allison, you're up first, and then I'll go to the other side.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here and these very excellent remarks, which I'm really just building on. I just did want to say that I think the African data policy framework really offers an excellent example of countries who are struggling with this. Unlike other data governance frameworks elsewhere in the world, it really sets the context in which this is happening. It sets the requirements of foundational digital infrastructures and data infrastructures that we require. And very importantly, it develops the concept of data as a public good, not data as good for the public, as it's often used within UN documents, which it can be as well, but the classical concept of data as a public good, as a non-rivalrous, non-exclusionary public good, which has very significant implications for data value creation. It also extends notions of data value creation, which have really predominated around around private sector data valuation to the public sector, and the enormous potential that has in the African continent. I think what's still missing, although it's great to see that that big hole of data governance is filled in the first round of digital compact, is that it focuses primarily on the safeguards and mitigating the harms. It doesn't adequately, although we are beginning to see that language come through in this section in particular, it doesn't adequately address the extremely uneven distribution of opportunities. And these will require redressing imbalances and inequalities are there. This is going to require quite classical economic regulation of digital public goods. And I think this comes out in some of the OECD work. It's come out in some other more critical work around digital public goods. But it's really in this area that this section needs to be dealing with issues of competition, of access to data. And this really raises big issues around the institutional arrangements of how we do this. Because at the moment, our data protection regulators in many of our countries don't have the balance of access to information and freedom of expression goes with that. And even in those institutions, the broader issues of data governance that would relate to competition and to those kinds of economic regulatory issues would really require cross-jurisdictional arrangements that I think can be are being addressed in other environments, but are a really big challenge for us here, because at the moment, without those efforts at redress, at creating equity, we're not going to see the kind of inclusion and the benefits from data that are potentially there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those rich comments, Alison. I'm too far to see your name, so we're just going to go in order. I see 3 placards, 1, 2, and 3, one after the other, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Pauline Magawi from the UN Development Coordination Office, Regional Office for Africa based here in Addis Ababa. Thank you very much for this very detailed session. I just wanted to touch on a point that I've not really heard so much about the youth. We know that in Africa, we're looking at a 70% of representation of youth. Again, these young people use the digital platforms a lot, particularly, for example, in my country, Kenya, they use Instagram and TikTok for their informal businesses and so on. I don't even think they know anything about their data protection because, again, moving to X, you see the kind of feedback that they provide, yeah, and they can be used maybe for say political reasons and so on. So what exactly are we doing to ensure that this very big population dividend is protected and that they really benefit from the digital platforms to ensure that they can use it for their use? They can use it for their economic reasons. But then the other thing is that we have 6 years left to 2030. How are we really going to ensure that we really use data and digital transformation to accelerate development in Africa? And finally, there's a question to our colleague from the AU. We know that the theme of the year is education. So how do we really ensure that the digital opportunities that exist are really used to advance education, particularly for the groups that are left behind, the groups that are in the rural areas that do not have access to digital platforms and so on? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pauline. I'll go to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Conference Chair. My name is Yilka Alabata. I'm from an association of IT companies here in Ethiopia. We try to engage and enable the private sector in the industry. My comments following my colleague next to me about the time left for 2030, we've done some work around enabling basic digital skills to be broadly available. And I would like to ask, to what extent this compact tries to, for example, explore the house within the given time frame, including, for example, by using Universal Service and Access Fund within the countries to scale skilling activities. And connected to that, I would like also to perhaps ask representatives from the African Union or African organizations, related African organizations, how this connects with the Continental Free Trade Agreement that's now in the process of being laid out, especially given now recently that the Digital Trade Protocol has been adopted at the heads of state level, and currently there are around 8 annexes being negotiated, which touch upon some of the topics discussed with this compact document. So how is that being linked or is being planned to be linked with the free trade agreement? It doesn't make sense given there's only 6 years for countries to explore making a charter for skills, for example, digital skills, instead of just waiting for donor money or some external sources. Thank you.
Thank you. Several questions related to time frame, and I think 2 questions to Suhila. So I'll come back to you at the end. We have one more card in the room, I believe, and then we have 2 hands online. So I'll take this question or comment in the room, and then I'll go online, please.
Many thanks for the opportunity. My name is Kadis Chala from ILO. I haven't heard much about the workers behind the data in terms of their rights and as well as protection. So if maybe from the AU or others who took the floor, if they can say a few words. Thank you.
Great, short question. Love it. We're going to go online to Brenda Gunde. This is the first time we have an intervention online. Hopefully the sound will work. Brenda, do you want to come in with your question or intervention?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. My name is Brenda Gunde. I'm a global lead of ICT for development for IFAD. Just a couple of interventions and comments based on the speakers, and thank you for all the speakers on the items that you have raised. The first one is on the role of local laws. I think there was a mention about localization and its impact on data sharing, and also in terms of in terms of data access. I think we need to also appreciate that local laws will play a significant role in terms of how data is going to be available. I think also appreciating in terms of the sovereignty of most of the nations. However, the GDC, I think, has come at the right time where it would be able to provide a guidance framework in terms of how countries need to position themselves in terms of how they can enable data sharing, create opportunities for interoperability within countries and also even across the borders. I think in the agriculture sector, we've been talking a lot about the role of the farmer registry as part of the digital public good and the role that it will play to unlock private sector investment and to supporting also farmers to be able to access to different digital services. So I think that's something also I think the GDC needs to emphasize in terms of the implementation aspects of the GDC, in terms of the use cases that the different UN agencies, but also in terms of the African Union and the different partners that are working with to develop such kind of use cases, because this will enable in terms of the lessons learned of what are some of the key elements that we need to be aware of when implementing such kind of initiatives. Thanks and over.
Thank you so much. We had a bit of a technical glitch at the end, but I think we got most of your questions and points that you wanted to make, including on the development of use cases. And again, another comment focusing on implementation. Our last intervention is from Serene Asefa. Serene, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for all the panelists. There is quite important topics. My question is around synthetic data. It's been in the rise, especially on self-learning, self-driving cars. So one of the argument around synthetic data is how do we balance privacy and safety and still making sure that innovation is happening. So I feel like the Global Digital Compact need to look at data governance beyond the personal generated data from individual. The other thing is, when I was looking back, what are the principles that will be required to ensure equitable international data governance? I feel like privacy should be the cornerstone. That means privacy by design. That will allow us the issue of accountability and responsibility. It will also put the responsibility and accountability to the technical community that will be responsible for providing different kind of technologies. So if we can include privacy by design as part of principle, and also transparency, how the data is captured and will be used. And one of the comment I have is on the commitment and action. I think paragraph 34, there was a suggestion of the development of new international and national data governance framework. Instead of new development of any governance framework, how do we capitalize the already existing framework and ensure that we focus more into interoperability of the existing framework instead of introducing new governance framework? That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know I said that there were no more hands, but then a few placards went up on this side, but this will be it. I see you, Karuti, also. I saw your placard go up, and Dobrina, and then we have Jimson online. Those will be the last three interventions for this panel session. If you have other questions, please bring them into panel session 2, because I do want to give people a chance to go to the bathroom and get some coffee. Karuti, can we start with you, then Dobrina, and then we'll go to Jimson online.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be very quick and brief. I think what I note is that we need to start harmonizing the language used by governments, the language used by private sector, and the language used by non-state actors are very different. The government is speaking the language of security and safety and privacy. The private sector wants freedom, non-state actors want freedom. to use the data. And I think we need to start looking for ways of harmonizing the language so that there is better utility and better utilization, and then we can have better use of data in a manner that spurs growth everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A helpful point. Debrina, over to you.
Thank you so much. Just very, very briefly, I just wanted to touch upon the issue of the time frame, which is indicated in the zero draft, specifically the time frame for agreeing on common targets, indicators, and metrics for the measurement of advancements on the various aspects that are proposed in the digital compact. So the time frame is by 2030, which in my opinion should be much more ambitious, like 6 years to come up with targets, which should be basically the baseline from which we start. We don't have 6 years to waste in developing targets. I think there are many good indicators that have already been developed by ITU. So we should certainly agree on the key ones that measure, especially the access and the affordability of connectivity, which are key issues on the African continent. The second point is the issue of the digital divide, which is critical. The global north and the global south are on diverging trajectories, so there should be emphasis. It's safe to move. No, not so safe, I guess. There's some flashbacks. So next is the issue of the demographic dividend on the African continent, or turning demographic trends into demographic dividend. I want to stress out the importance of covering the preconditions, which are critical. We talk about digital skills, but I think we need to take a step back and talk about educational outcomes in general. We know that 80% of African students face certain deficiencies in baseline outcomes such as reading and math. So there should be an emphasis on that as well. We cannot just leapfrog in terms of the conversation is leapfrogging, but we also need to make sure that we walk that talk. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Just to reassure everyone, the ECA security team, IT team, is working on the connectivity issue, and we'll speak to them over the break. We have one final intervention for the responses. Sohila, many people have put questions to you. Maybe we can come back at the beginning after coffee and have you just respond to some of the questions. If any of the panelists want to respond to the questions that have been brought up in this Q&A session, we'll invite you to speak at the beginning of Morton's session. I'm stealing some of his time. So Jimson, over to you for, I hope, a short intervention, and that will be the last one. No. Okay, we'll bring you back in the second session, and I think we'll close this session now. Thank you to all the panelists. You were remarkable in your brevity and the richness of your insights. I'm incredibly grateful. My colleague is going to have a hard time to match this in the second session. So thank you very much. We'll continue this conversation over coffee and snacks just outside this room. Let's please come back at 11:05. And yes, if we can very quickly get to the stairs, I'd love to take a group picture with everyone just outside. Follow the photographer. We'll take one quick group photo, and then you're free to get coffee and refreshments. Thank you.